Hey guys, Skoto here. So there's been a lot of debate on the whole Battlefield versus Call of Duty franchises this year, and which one is better versus which one should do better. And it's a lot more heated than it has been in previous years, and I decided I'm finally going to weigh in on that. Now, having played the release version of Call of Duty and the beta version of Battlefield 5, I haven't seen everything Battlefield 5 has to offer, but I've seen enough that I could tell right away that Call of Duty was absolutely going to smoke Battlefield 5, and when the pre order numbers were revealed, it became pretty clear that I was right. Now, you can go back and watch my Battlefield 5 beta impressions to get a better understanding of why I thought that, but it's not super important for the purposes of this rant. Now, you can bring other factors into consideration like historic popularity and the whole social justice debacle surrounding Battlefield 5's female troops, which, as an aside, I think is an absolutely stupid debate. No, it's not historically accurate, and no, it's not ruining anyone's game. People who like complaining will always find something to complain about. No, what I think is, the biggest thing driving the disparity of the sales and the fan reception are two main factors, and that's design philosophy and community management. Now, to preface, I took a multi year break from both franchises at the height of their popularity. I skipped Battlefield 4, Hardline, and Battlefield 1, and I skipped Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 2, and everything else up till now. Back when I did play, Treyarch, bless their hearts, were kind of the black sheep developers of the Call of Duty franchise, who made the Call of Duty titles that you played on off years between Infinity Ward games. But they've stuck with it, they've carried the flags, and at times they've received a lot of flack for their decisions with the series. But they learned, they practice, and they listened to the Call of Duty community to make sure they could deliver a game that their fans would love. DICE has always been DICE. They have a reputation for putting out solid titles that were polished and focused on teamwork and objective based gameplay. And they've never been afraid of taking a few risks with their games that don't always pan out. I can respect that because they would typically look at it and say, look, this worked, this didn't. Let's take the good and the bad and learn from them to innovate improvements. But somewhere along the way, they lost that guiding star of appreciating their players' feedback, and the primary drive became the risk itself, innovation at all costs. And that brings me to my main points. The design philosophy for Treyarch is to make a fun game for their players. The design philosophy for DICE is to make an immersive experience for their players. Now, it's easy to think that the two are one and the same, so humor me for a minute. Treyarch has been listening to feedback for basically a decade and using it to refine their formula while following the market trends. Blackout and Zombies are both perfect examples. When World at War launched in 2008 with Nazi zombies, it was a mode no one asked for and no one really expected, but it was such a success that they've, made it into every title since as its own mode and continued to refine it based on feedback. When Blackout was added to Black Ops 4, yeah, it was in response to the popularity of PUBG and Fortnite. You can bet a lot of the devs have been playing both, and they probably looked at it and said, we can put this in, and we can take out everything that isn't fun about PUBG, which is a very long list, I might add, and put in everything that is fun about Call of Duty. So they implemented it, and yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, it'll need to be polished over time, but damned if the game doesn't let you play it the way you want to play. Blackout is a sandbox for crafting your own fun. Is it the best battle royale on the market? Probably not. That's heavily a matter of opinion. Is it pretty damn good? Absolutely. Does it restrict your choices for how you want to play it? Absolutely not. And see, that's what Treyarch is doing. They lay the framework and they polish the final product, make sure you have some rules and objectives so that you can have a relatively bug free and balanced experience. But the experience itself is up to you. You get to have fun the way you want to. Even the changes to the base multiplayer and how each character works are in response to games like Destiny 2 and Overwatch. People realized hero shooters were pretty fun if the abilities were interesting and balanced. Moving the game more towards a hero shooter and giving 10 points to spend on weapons, perks, and attachments gives a lot of freedom to build and play characters the way you want to play them. Sure, you can't take everything for every gun ever, but that's not the goal. The goal is to make a unique loadout that complements your playstyle, and that's entirely possible. In that framework, there's also 8 different game modes to tickle whatever itch you're having, completely independent of zombies and blackout. Now, let's compare that to DICE. DICE tends to play to the beat of their own drum, and to be fair, sometimes out of that we get gems like Battlefield 2142 with its Titan mode, and games like Battlefield 3, which were just a solid, all around polished experience. And what was really amazing about these games was the potential for emergent gameplay. These fondly remembered Battlefield moments that we all had, and that DICE actually used to highlight in their Only in Battlefield series. Do you guys remember that? Because I do. I remember jeeps laden with C4, sitting on the wings of Spitfires and firing down, and hovering over a Titan to let my squad pour out onto the flight deck. DICE used to be really good at interpreting fan feedback and taking it into account when making those, open-ended experiences for players to have fun. They were good at interacting with the player base and good at managing their community, which admittedly at times could be pretty toxic. But sometime after Battlefield 4 that changed. It started with Battlefield 1, and by the time Battlefield 5 rolled around, they had reached a complete turning point. And that's where DICE really started to screw the pooch. So, when the Battlefield 5 beta hit, the negative feedback was tremendous. A lot of the community piped up with things like, we don't like the attrition system, we don't like how it forces us to stick to predefined routes and limits our ability to act independent of our squad, we don't like the changes to spotting, we don't like how the weapon upgrades force us down rigid paths, we don't like the new realistic recoil system, and we don't like the shorter time to kill. Now, for me, there were a couple other cardinal sins, like taking control of your camera away during certain actions. I guess they have to remind you that you're playing a character, not yourself. Instead of watching for enemies while I revive, I have to look at a close-up of some CG goober's face. And if I have to get in and out of a vehicle, I get treated to a close-up of the paint job. Well, that paint sure is interesting. There was still a good game there. Underneath all the stupid, superficial decisions, the bones of the game were good. It felt good to move around and shoot and work together to take objectives. Now, DICE heard the feedback, and they did the one thing you absolutely cannot do as a game developer. They decided that they knew better, and they told that to the community. They doubled down on every poorly received system, and they told the fanbase that they were wrong, and if they didn't like it, they shouldn't buy it. Even when they announced their Battle Royale mode, it was made known that it would be squads only. People naturally responded that not everyone likes squads. They like a solo option. DICE came back and said, well, they don't think players will have fun solo, so they're limiting it to squads. DICE thought they knew the fans better than they knew themselves, and used it as a way to limit the players' options and the scope of the players' freedom to enjoy the game the way the players want to enjoy the game. Instead of making sure their game was fun, they were so preoccupied with refining the way they thought you should play that they didn't even take into consideration that their way just really wasn't that fun. And if your way of having fun in Battlefield deviated from their narrow, rigid scope, well, sorry, buddy, maybe you should try Call of Duty. And then people did. The pre-orders came out, and 4 to 5 copies of Call of Duty were pre-ordered for every 1 copy of Battlefield 5. DICE flipped. EA flipped. Their stock took a dive, which sucks because I own a couple shares of EA. And then they started looking for a scapegoat. And much like the mistake that Disney made with The Last Jedi, they found one in a few isolated nerds who didn't like that DICE was claiming to be realistic while depicting women with, prosthetic limbs on the front lines of World War II. They started blaming their fans and saying that their fans turned away because they were sexist. Their fans felt threatened by women on the battlefield. They latched onto a few vocal trolls, and they used that to dismiss or sweep under the rug every legitimate complaint levied against their game. Of course, the fan base reacted poorly. Fans don't typically like being called sexist and misogynist in response to unrelated criticism. Now, truth be told, I agree to some extent with most of the points that social justice advocates bring up about video games. I do think women are probably underrepresented in gaming, and that there's some level of sexism inherent in the industry. I agree that a lot of gaming is male power fantasy, though I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with catering to your primary demographic. Now, you also have to remember that this industry is really only about 30 to 40 years old. That's one, maybe two generations, and for most of that, it was definitely a boys' club just as much as G.I. Joe was. It needs time to mature, and some of that isn't going to be willing. Now, I think that's a reasonable statement. But then you have the far end of the spectrum, the militant social justice warriors who make their living as a professional blogger instead of getting an actual job. Their livelihood and ability to eat depends on their ability to generate a profit from controversy, so they'll stir the pot every chance they get. Some of them might even believe what they're peddling. So now you have the studio ragging on the fans, and the militant social justice warriors ragging on the fans, and most of the fans are caught in the middle wondering where all this vitriol is even coming from, because 95% of them just don't give a damn that the British sniper is an Asian girl for some reason. It's like, who cares? Meanwhile, DICE continues to double down and is about to push the game out after alienating half the fans with their design decisions, and the other half by calling them sexist in a very poorly thought out knee-jerk reaction to complaints about the design decisions. That was a can of worms they should never have opened. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm playing games, I just want to have fun, on my own or with friends. I work 40 to 70 hours a week, depending on whether or not I'm traveling for work, and that's really my only motivation when I come home and sit down to play a game, is have fun. Right now, what it really comes down to is Treyarch seems much more concerned with how much fun I'm having than DICE does. DICE seems more concerned that I feel like I'm actually in some idealized version of World War II where everyone only carries 2 magazines of ammo and has to rely on unreliable internet strangers to work in perfect concert. Well, good luck with that. I hope DICE finds their way again. I really do. I hope they fire every single one of their community managers that opened Pandora's box this cycle, and they start listening to criticism again. And next time they put out a quality product that centers around players having fun. But I'm not holding my breath. This might be the last nail in the coffin for DICE. And that's really a shame because, in the interest of full disclosure, I was rooting for Battlefield 5 this time. I really was. And I honestly couldn't have been more disappointed that they chose to go the way they did. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Was Battlefield 5 really ruined by social justice, or was it the poor design choices? If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
You guys get headshots, make sure you don't get hit by the fire. Make sure your thumbs up is up on green.
Working on it.
An old man with a gimpy eye just put you down.